and the opposition, led by Azimio and other parties. How did that discussion go? How comes Kenya Kwanza claimed majority, and we all know that the opposition had more MPs than the government? How did we allow the government to influence and infiltrate independent MPs and MPs from the opposition side to influence a majority? Can we find out if it's possible to push the government through court or whichever means, so that we can take back the majority absolution from the government back to opposition, because that is the only way we would successfully push for a removal of president, either on grounds of incapacity or on the grounds of violation of Kenyan law, having committed a crime under Kenyan or international law, or is gross misconduct, or the violation of the constitution. Allow me to yield the floor.
Thank you for that.
Manu, I think we answered those because they are quite a bit.
Yes, kindly, if you can respond to those first.
I'll pick some and then you can pick some. Now, the first thing with us taking a proactive role, I say that LSK has been striving with regards to the protests, yes, because you cannot plan instances of abduction. Though we have been able to get progressive courts that are able to give us blanket orders in terms of access to the different police stations, so that irrespective of whichever police station, we don't have to come back and get another order. But I agree with you that with regards to the future of us taking certain proactive roles, particularly after appointment of cabinet, that is something that we're already thinking around, and with like-minded partners on the various strategies that we can employ. And we are humbled because it's by working together with the different institutions that we're able to make a greater concerted effort, because the need is quite large, and it's all around the country that we must respond to the different challenges that are arising. Now, with regards to issuing a notice to the police, the problem is it's not the notice that gives you a license to protest. Protests can also be spontaneous. And so you're giving a notice for the purpose of them facilitating the protest. So it's not a directive that you have to give it this way. And I think what the acting IG is trying to seemingly tone down after the court orders. But the aim is to merely just facilitate and provide protection. But it's not that that is the license that you will be able to now protest if you give that such a notice, because we have had even instances where the Nairobi area commandant has regional commandant has refused for people to exercise their right to picket, irrespective. And that is not his prerogative. It's a constitutional right. As long as we are peaceful and you're able to exercise your rights well, and that's why we need to continually be vigilant and raise concerns, particularly when they're goons. And we have seen situations, the ones who call themselves Nairobi business people or city business people with rungus, trying to infiltrate the protests, and those goons that come to take advantage and steal. We need to be vigilant so that those ought to be arrested, because they are not part of the peaceful protest. They're destroying private property and stealing from even the protesters who were just engaging in a peaceful protest. And so as LSK will continue, we are looking at the various questions, both constitutional, and we're grappling on the best strategies on how to come forward. Now, with regards to the other methods that are available, of course, the Law Society has always gone to our courts to raise concerns, because as much as we table our concerns with regards to any pieces of legislation in Parliament, and we have seen how our Parliament has been the weakest link in this country, in this nation. I dare say I've said this several times, and I continue to say it. Our Parliament has failed us because they have forgotten that their role is representation and are carrying out other roles. The courts had declared CDF unconstitutional. It ought to be implemented. It ought to be one of the first things that the head of state implemented and stopped this issue that Treasury is continuing to disburse CDF, yet it's unconstitutional. We need to have the women reps, that NGA fund that is unregulated on how do they account for the monies that are given to them. How much do we actually see benefiting? That money should go into education or health. CDF should go to the governors to actually support development projects and should be purely for development projects at the county level, so that we can hold our governors accountable in the same manner and fashion we have held the head of state demanded for accountability and transparency, so that we can actually feel the benefits, and MPs and women reps can focus on what took them there to represent us. One of the speakers has raised the concern that how did we allow independent candidates to switch, yet the opposition and independent candidates made up the majority. And again, to say that we don't have proper leaders who recognize the importance of protecting their members. Once they get in, they sell themselves for the highest bidder, and we see members of parliament changing sides, and that's why we have an executive that is controlling the parliament, and that's why we can see decisions are made at the executive level and implemented to the letter at parliament level. And that's not the kind of democracy that will ensure growth, accountability, and transparency. Because today we would be comfortable to raise, if you had concerns about any cabinet nominees, is to go and table and challenge them through your representative in parliament, knowing full well that your representative is going to stand up for you. But the challenge that we have in this particular parliament is we have parliamentarians that do not listen, that do not want to hear the position of the people, and they will remember you 5 years when it's almost the close of the term. That is when they'll remember that they have an electorate, and they've forgotten the primary purpose in which they went to hold those particular positions, those particular seats. And therefore, with such a parliament, the question is, that's why now the head of state has to negotiate with the people of Kenya, because those who ideally should be representing your voices, should be standing up for you, should be able to share with the executive the kind of position the people of Kenya are holding, have failed to do so. And it's not that we let them, but it's individual choices. As a nation, unless we demand for accountability and transparency, not just from our executive, but as well from our parliament, because parliament has the ability to vet the budgets that are being used by the executive, have the ability to vet the borrowing powers, has the ability to vet these nominees, has the ability to say no. And the more we keep quiet and they watch and we don't hold them accountable, then we'll continue to see the games that we saw, that in 30 minutes we allowed the army to be deployed, and the army is still deployed indefinitely for this particular period, because even the orders that were given to the court, there's no particular period that is be noted until further period, until they feel that they have restored peace. So is peace when they have stifled the voice of the people, or when they're able to finally listen and sit together and work with the people? And so if we don't have a parliament that is able to vet, a parliament that is able to be held, to hold people accountable, then we'll continue to struggle and strive. And it's high time that we also ask our parliamentarians for accountability, so that we can actually have a government that is working. They can hold the executive accountable, and judiciary as well. We demand from them accountability, that they hold both these two arms of government accountable. Manuel, we can pick maybe the ones that I may not have responded to.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I think you have addressed some of the questions that were asked, and I think it's important to note that the Law Society issued a statement on the question of notice to police, before you demonstrate. And of course, the courts have already suspended that directive. And for those reasons, I believe that question has been addressed. The right to demonstrate does not require a person to seek permission to express themselves. It's a right under Article 37, which does not require any other person's permission, as long as it's the demonstration or assembly or picketing is peaceful and it's within the law. I don't think, and of course, as the courts have pronounced themselves previously, this is not the first time the IG or acting IG have attempted to take us back to the old constitution, where you would be required to seek permission to exercise a constitutional right. We will be waiting for the court, of course, to render its final determination on that question by the case under Katiba. On the questions of the cabinet, and I think, Madam President, you have addressed that question properly. We have two processes to actually vet these individuals through our representatives, who have definitely failed us as the members of the public. We expect them to take their work seriously. They have a duty to oversight, to legislate, and to represent. They have actually abdicated their roles, their seats in parliament, because that is the most important seat that has representation of the members of the public. The views that the members of the public are addressing through this citizen assembly and through social media are issues that these members of parliament, we gave powers to represent us in the National Assembly and the Senate, are supposed to actually represent us by ensuring that they vet these individuals, that will not have a cabinet secretary who has been implicated in court cases, that will not have a cabinet secretary who has ongoing court cases, who has been implicated in corruption matters. And the buck stops at them. If you look at the people who are appointed as cabinet secretaries, some of them had ongoing cases in court. Some of them have been subjected to, have been suspected to have actually pilfered public money. And so these people went through the same parliament, and all of them voted with acclamation. And I think it's important that we hold them responsible for the duty that we have given them. They have a choice either to represent the people who elected them, or to cede that power back to the people for purposes of ensuring that the people will pick a person who can represent their own interests. I'll keep opening up the space. I don't know whether Jatelo, you're there. If you can be able to make your contributions, you have the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President and everyone. I'd love to speak on two things. First is on the cabinet. And I'd ask LSK to give the Constitution, what the Constitution envisages of a cabinet. What does the Constitution see? What's the cabinet that the Constitution wants? I was taking some few notes as I was reading my Constitution. And if you check Article 10, and you remember the other day, the former KRA chairman, Mwaura, the court said he's not fit to hold that office because of our national values. And this same Article 10 on national values talks about equality, equity, inclusiveness, and protection of the marginalized. So I think the cabinet we want is a cabinet that has a third woman, a third gender rule is observed, a cabinet that has a person with disability, a cabinet that has young people, a cabinet that has marginalized and minority communities. And Article 100 requires Parliament to enact laws to promote representation of women, youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized persons in governance. If you check 54.2, demands that 5% of elective and appointive positions be reserved for persons with disabilities. If you go to 55, it emphasizes the need for involvement of youth in every stage of governance, and I don't think cabinet is not included in that. Article 27.8 lays foundation to ensure that at least a third of women or men, their third gender, at every level of governance. Now, if you check the previous cabinet we've had post-2010, Uhuru never reached the third gender rule, which I think out of 21 should be at least 7 women or 7 men, because actually women can also be majority. If you check Ruto's cabinet, that was never achieved. So I think by disbanding his cabinet, he had a chance to get it right, but still maybe he's not getting it right. So I think if LSK could furnish him, could advise and tell him that this is the cabinet envisaged by the Constitution of Kenya. Yeah, because I don't think we can. And number 2, on recycling these former cabinet secretaries, do they need to go through vetting afresh? I need to know that. And as we talk about austerity measures and living within our means, what is the cost of vetting a cabinet secretary in terms of sitting allowances and all those things? Why then did he have to dismiss them, to sneak them back? Why did he just dismiss those he wanted to dismiss? That's my question. Then secondly, I'd speak about education. I'm doing some research on the cost of education in Kenya. If you check, for example, CDF is about, every constituency spends 30% of their CDF on bursaries. That's about 15 billion across the 290 constituencies. We have presidential bursary at around 800 million. We have governors nowadays having scholarships and such things, county bursaries. We have Ministry of Education bursaries. Then we have non-state actors also giving bursaries. And you find that we also have women rep, the NGAF, having some allocation for bursaries. And you find that these bursaries are given to people who are your friends or through political affiliations. For example, I don't think anybody will get presidential bursary without connection. CDF, it's the politicians dish it to their supporters. Yet in their manifesto, both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio said they would strive for a Kenya where there is free education. My proposal, therefore, which I invite everyone maybe to think through, is what if we take all these monies? Why do we need 15 billion to go to constituencies and go back to schools? Why don't we have a national education fund whereby all these funds can be put there? Then we ensure that we have a universal free education from primary, secondary to university level. Yesterday you saw the bishops calling the president to change the university funding model. So my suggestion towards this is that all monies that are meant for education purposes be put in one fund so that there is accountability, little embezzlement, and there is no need to give me bursary. Just pay directly to the school so that I go to school and learn for free. So I think those are the 2 things I wanted to ask on the cabinet, and that on education. I'm very keen on education because I'm a product of free primary education. This Gen Z product of free primary education, and that's why we are able to ask questions that will make our country better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those questions and contribution. Be Real, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Manwa. Good morning, Dr. President. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Kindly proceed.
Yeah, my question is just, it's aligned with what Benji said. How can we file for a memoranda for these individuals that have questionable characters and they have pending cases and they have fraudulent cases still pending on with them? How can we file that? Because I think now we should vouch for filing each and every individual at a personal level, and us as if you and your team as Repubono can support that, because this is despicable what's happening, because we're just being it's feeding from left to right. We're not getting any solutions out of this. So how can you file for these people that were elected, actually selected? They were not elected, they were selected, so that we can remove them from those in now in the law legally.
Thank you so much, Biril. Ian, sorry, Arnold.
Thank you once more. I have a question. Mine goes for education, just like Jatelo said. We've seen it go through social media that around 153,000 students are not going to receive help. And we both know for sure that most of these students, they can't support themselves. They depend on government help. But now we see 153,000 students having their education crippled. What does LSK hold in accordance to this, and what do you advise these affected students to do? Because I've seen in more university groups, I think KU groups, and I think MKU, though MKU is a private university, but they are advocating that students go for protests in line with the amendments that are coming in, that they are going to cut the budget for help by around, I think it's around 4.2 billion shillings. So what is the stand of LSK on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. We can take one more before I allow the president. D, are you there? You have the microphone.
Okay. Mine is a question to the legal minds that are here. I saw Nelson Harvey post something about that CSs, when they are fired, they can no longer go back or active position or appointed position. I want to know how true that a part of the constitution is, and what is the legal, like, let's take them to court or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam President, if you can take some of those, if you're there.
Okay. Now, let me start with the last one with regards to the 153 students. These are some of the changes that we are agitating for with regards to the education fund, or we are raising concern with. Help affects so many people with regards to access to education, but also there have been questions on the current free primary education that is there. So education as a whole raises very critical questions. We remember the start of the year, even after the floods, we raised that concern with the ministry and the head of state with regards to, there are several schools that had been flooded, people had lost their homes, people had moved, and yet the government was swiftly moving on to open. As long as schools within the cities could open, they had forgotten about the other schools, that children were going to be disenfranchised. While others move on, them they're struggling, they'll be left behind. And we raised that concern that it seemed that it fell upon deaf ears because nothing was since done. And that's why we're having this even eminent strike, that a notice has been issued, because we even have the larger problem of the JSC that is still ongoing. And so these are concerns we have continued to raise as the Law Society of Kenya. And it's hard time that we also ask our representatives, even in parliament, because they have the ability to affect the budgets. Because you can talk about something, but if it's not budgeted for, then it means there will be no indication. When you even look at the proposed cuts in the budget and the Appropriation Act, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, we trace where is the money going? Where does the budget say what is going to be cut? Because yes, the executive can cut, but it can cut crucial areas for the citizens to feel the cut and them not to feel the cut. The cuts should be towards their current expenditure, trips, any luxuries that are there, so that they actually budget for access to education, because the education question is large. It's not just about the health students, it's about free primary education. It's about access to books and facilities. It's about the access to school, food that is given to some of the students in school. We have cases of people and children not being able to even have meals. And if it's not for the meal that is sometimes provided in schools, then there's nothing, there's not even access to even something that these young children are able to partake in. So the education problem is a larger problem that we need to deal with, even as we look at the current syllabus and curriculum. So it's not just us patching up with regards to help. Help is a smaller part of the larger education problem that we've been continuing to raise, that the government needs to have serious review and budget towards it, because it's not about promising and talking about it. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, so that we can actually see seriousness in improvement. Amanwa, maybe I didn't write notes. You could let me know the other areas that questions are, and then I can respond. And I see we
Yeah,
have
I think
Abna.
one of the questions
We
that,
have Abna here. We have
yeah,
Lavance here. They can also answer some of these questions with regards to the law, so that where I missed that, they
sure.
can fill in.
Sure. One of the concerns that was raised, I think, by Be Real was which process should the members of the public take when they want to submit memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries. I don't know if you can take that. Then we can, of course, allow the other advocates on the forum to answer the questions that have been put forth. Madam President, are you there?
Repeat, Manwa.
The process that the members of the public should use to pass memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries before the vetting starts, and how Parliament can be able to have those views from the members of the public. Which process is available under the law?
Well, there's public participation that is supposed to be open to members of the public. You can share to the clerk of the National Assembly. You can share to us as the Law Society, because we'll be sharing our views as well. You can share to your member of parliament as members of the public. So public participation is open to each and every one individual, that you can share your personal views. You can raise memorandums as different groups, as the private sector, public sector. And so it's open. Public participation was the new part of the new changes brought under the constitution, that members of the public can actually have their voice heard, that you don't need to wait for your member of the parliament. If your member of parliament is ignoring you, you can actually share your concerns, you can actually share your views. One of the laws chief was rendered unconstitutional because it failed on the threshold of actually carrying out public participation. If you see the rejected bill, Finance Act 2024, was because of the overwhelming public participation and the concern that members of the public even had, that they had raised their voices, they had complained, they had issued memorandum, and all of that was ignored. But people were able to share their views, even the Law Society and various groups, with regards to those that particular legislation and the effect and the impact. And so similarly, you can share your views, writing to the clerk, and we'll look for his address and share, so that you can share your views to the National Assembly. We can share your views as well through the Law Society, and we'll forward all those views. And part of the Citizens' Assembly is also for us to come up with joint solutions and recommendations of how we best think that we can share. And maybe it's time we thought about a platform for public participation that enables members of the public to be able to share their views without having to reach for any special numbers or email addresses, that we can actually have a platform that will track all the memorandum that has been shared so that it's open and transparent, and they cannot say that they did not receive these emails, they did not receive these recommendations, that this number of people were not able to participate and they only got these few views. And as well, a platform that can be an online platform to ensure that as many people, irrespective of the difference in time or distance, we're able to ensure that as many people share their views and their concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I think perhaps also the members of the public should know that if you go to the website of the National Assembly, you will find the respective emails of every other department in Parliament. You can be able to actually present your views through a memoranda, through those emails, and perhaps expect that they write back to you for a purpose of you presenting those views personally when the vetting process will be ongoing. I think there was a question that was asked about the constitution of the cabinet secretaries under the constitution. Article 152 provides for that process, and as you know, the president has powers to appoint a minimum of 14 and a maximum of 24. And I think Jatero asked questions about why the president will dismiss and reappoint the same people, and what implication that has on public expenditure and use and good use of public money. And I think that is a valid question. Some of those questions will be subject to a court process, so that the court can interpret as to whether, whereas the president has powers under Article 152 to hire and fire. And remember, the Gazette notice dismissing these cabinet secretaries was actually gazetted as dismissal. And a dismissal in its explanations and interpretation means you've been fired. And you can't be fired from an office if you didn't commit an offense. So why would you then name the same individuals? And I think that is a constitutional question as to whether the president has capacity to play around with Article 152, especially on the specific powers to dismiss and then purport to reappoint the same people. There are several constitutional questions that can only be answered by the court on that question. And of course, we are following up as the Law Society to ensure that the due process of the law, especially in appointment of cabinet secretaries, is followed. We are hoping that the members of parliament will rise to the occasion when these names are presented before them and forget about their political affiliations and actually do their work, represent the members of the public, represent the views of the people, and ensure that the individuals who are appointed to those offices meet the constitutional requirements under Article 10 and under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. I will straight allow Mr. Nyakundi.
Sorry, Mano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, this is Abner. If I could perhaps pick, I think there are 2 or 3 questions that...
Yes, proceed, Council.
Thank you.
Proceed, Council.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'll just straight deal. There was a question as to whether those who have been reappointed are subject to vetting. I believe that once the Gazette notice was Cabinet Secretary, then the process starts afresh in terms of vetting. So I believe that they will be subject to vetting again by Parliament. So just to pick from where you left, we'd encourage members of the public to submit their memorandum if they have views or opinions or something to submit to Parliament in terms of their reservations in terms of their reappointment. Then secondly, on this legal question as to whether the Gazette notice now touches on character or suitability of office, as you have rightly put, this is a new test as regards to Article 152 of the Constitution. But remember that The biggest test is usually on the suitability in terms of gross violation of the provision of constitution or unsuitability to hold public office as per Chapter 6. Now, I'm just reminded by the Supreme Court decision, especially as regards, if you can remember, the two legislators, somebody like Ferdinand Waititu and Mike Sonko. Remember, it is the Supreme Court that held that they are unsuitable